Hello, I'm Tone Lanzillo, and this is Climate-Duluth. Climate-Duluth is a series of conversations with people from the Duluth area who are concerned about and engaged in various aspects of the environment and climate change. And today I'm very honored to have Bill Mittlefehldt with us. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we just start by what you're currently doing and working on?
It's a delight to have this opportunity to share because there's a lot of exciting things going on in Duluth, and I have a small part of that, but I'm appreciating what you're doing, putting together these programs. I understand you've already done 4 with Brett, Jamie, Alice, and Izzy. So I join a cast of a lot of talented folks. So I'm Bill Mittlefehldt. I live and have worked in Duluth. I am an educator by profession. I taught in the Chicago area for 2 years. I taught in the Twin Cities for 32 years. And last year I was service coordinator at Denfeld High School. So that counts as another year of teaching. And so I've had a lot of great experience as an educator, and I've retired twice to get to this opportunity, Tone. So I want to share some of what I've learned in those years of education and why I've retired twice to get to this table with you and your friends in the audience. Right. So shall I just launch into kind of what's on my mind?
Sure.
I've had some amazing experiences, and I've done a lot of partnering between schools and communities to provide opportunities for kids to prepare for the future. And that's been extremely rewarding, and I won't go off the deep end on that, but let's say there's a lot more that we can do when we get kids involved with their community, because it helps weave American teamwork. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what fascinates me and what I've been spending a lot of time on recently, especially in Duluth. So Climate-Duluth is a wonderful topic because it has a lot to do with what seems to be unfolding in a very positive way in Duluth.
Okay.
So the first concept that really intrigues me is the creation. We have received so much. Every day we get clean, fresh air, fresh water, land to grow our food and our animals. Right. And we live very high thanks to the amount of gifts or assets we receive every day from the natural system, or as I call it, the creation, which is the sum of all ecosystems. And our ecosystems provide us this at no cost. We are receiving a gift. So as I've aged, I've gotten a little more capable of being grateful each day for everything that I have received, including the fellowship from you and some of the allies that you hang out with. So this understanding of creation and how it's a gift that we often share gratitude for, Duluth is known for that. People come up here, I think, by the hundreds of thousands every year to enjoy the lake, the trails, the people, the ambiance, and a number of things that make Duluth a unique community. We share the gifts of gratitude when we stand on the rocks and we look at the harbor, or you climb the Anger Tower and you can see the whole horizon. It's an amazing thing, and you feel it deeply. And I mean, that depth of feeling has a lot to do with why people love Duluth, and many people like coming up here and coming back here. Right. So building on that sense of creation, what we've received has enabled us to build a Commonwealth. A Commonwealth is your community and my community right here, using the fresh air, fresh water, resources, and other assets that enable us to live in this relatively challenging climate. And so the Commonwealth is something that's also enabled you to do this with the city resources that you're provided with, and has enabled me to learn more from my partners here in Duluth. And so moving in that direction, I think we need to appreciate the fact that we've grown a culture, we've got a heritage, we have relationships, and we have very strong institutions here in Duluth, especially our wonderful mayor and the council that's coming together behind a number of these climate-related issues. I think that's an element of high respect, and it shows you that the citizens that are pushing the council and have elected the mayor really respect the talent and what we can do together. In fact, I believe in January there's at least one meeting that I know about where people are coming from other parts of the state to come listen to what's going on in Duluth. So that's going to be fun. But what's special about our Commonwealth is we not only live in a challenging environment, expressing gratitude and appreciation and respect for those relationships with the ecosystem, but we are building something very special here. And I think it's starting to attract some attention from other parts of the state, which is awesome. But there's a huge threat, and one of the reasons why I'm glad that we have so many assets here and institutions moving in a similar direction is that we're going to have to pull together like we've never pulled before. As you may recognize, this graphic is from the International Panel on Climate Change, the UN panel.
Right.
And it's a graphic of what they are predicting is happening right now, right here in Duluth, but also everywhere on the planet. That these are a record of time over climate emissions, carbon emissions from fossil fuels. And here we are moving towards a climax point, which is about sometime in the 2020s. In other words, coming right around the bend here, let's say within the next 10 years.
Right.
And at this point, we are going to have to make a choice. Are we going to see the climate dynamics create more and more destruction of our Commonwealth, the economy, the community, the housing, the transportation, all the things that we just saw impacted because of the recent 2-day storm? We're going to have big troubles that have huge costs, and this is also not only economic costs in dollars, but human costs in suffering and loss, okay? Or are we going to take a turn for the future in a more sustainable manner and use less fossil fuels, more renewable energy in a way that's got greater energy efficiency and more carbon sequestration and things like that? So there are two paths before us, and that's why it's nice you and I are meeting right here before this crisis point that's coming in the next 10 years. And we are bringing these people who you have already brought in to discuss some of this stuff with Brett, Jamie, Alice, and Izzy, that there are a lot of people rallying to this opportunity because it's, on one side, it's a crisis because our institutions need to change. On the other hand, it's an opportunity. There's a hidden opportunity here for us to pull together and develop more American teamwork right here in Duluth so that we can help Duluth make this change to a more sustainable, healthy, and active future.
Right.
So I'm excited about that because, in a sense, the creation has given us this opportunity. And before we lose some of those assets that could be destroyed by heat-related problems in the dynamics of the Earth's atmosphere, we can pull together first and build that teamwork that can guide this cultural transition.
Okay.
And so I'm excited about that because I don't know, I understand from watching the Weather Channel, we're seeing more Category 5 tornadoes. We're having more killer hurricanes, and it's affecting California's economy hugely. I don't know if you've seen some of that. Insurance troubles because of the fires they've had in California for the last 2 years.
Okay.
But the costs of that are definitely over $1 billion in just 1 year, and that was unbudgeted costs, so it's going to come out of California in some way. Those problems could come here unless we address some of these problems by reducing our climate emissions from fossil fuels, okay? So the good news is we're standing here together having a conversation about teamwork, and the question is, well, then if that's a coming emergency, some people call it climate emergency, what can we do about it together now because it hasn't arrived yet? And we can only deal with things that we see or can visualize. Well, we're gonna have to visualize this before it's here because if we wait, what the UN team is telling us is that there's going to be a series of cascading climate disasters that will disable your institutions. And so there'll be loss, suffering, huge economic impacts, and we'll wonder, why didn't the dummies back here, when they had the time, invest in changing our choices, developing better policies, and aiming towards a future that we can sustain after all the gifts we've received from the Creator through the creation.
Right.
So it just raises a question. So that's kind of what's on my mind, and that's what I hope to spend the rest of my days doing, okay? Okay. So you want to ask me a practical question about that?
Yeah, so what are you doing these days? What are you working on? What projects are you involved in?
Well, I'm 73, so this didn't just occur. It's not a short-term deal, but I've had some amazing partners in schools and communities that have helped me learn that this is a manageable crisis, but we've got to get everyone on the team. This is like all hands on deck. And this means we have to get youth, adults, seniors, and institutional partners all working in a common way. Okay. There's not room for division and distortion, shall we say, because it's an emergency situation, and let's say we have less than 10 years to get everybody on that track, okay? So what I've done in my past, and I would like to do more in the future, is I have developed some skills at bringing schools and communities together to set targets. This is step one. Set targets for the communities to offer to kids, you can work on this climate project or that climate impact or this business system or that health system to improve our ability to respond.
Okay.
And so we actually did something related at Denfeld last year. We got a small grant to publish this. We convened these community leaders in community health, business health, environmental health, and civic health. And then we put the 200 goals that they recommended for Duluth kids, students, to work on projects that helped improve our local system. And then the kids who completed projects received hours of service learning. Hours are pretty cheap, but what's kind of nice is that they were honored for working to improve the community system, their Commonwealth.
Right.
And it was done publicly, and they, one of the teams actually from Denfeld was involved in an international video contest because their project was so good.
Wow.
They were invited by the city's director of energy to participate in an international video contest, partly because they had really done an outstanding job on their project. So I'm very proud of them.
Wow.
And I'm sure, and they did this when they were in 10th grade, so you can imagine the impact. If those kids are doing projects like that over here, in a few more years, they may be leading the charge as to how can we save more energy, apply more renewable energy, increase our teamwork, and celebrate. But one of the things we're gonna have to do in order to keep from getting depressed is we're gonna have to celebrate each other's achievements. And so that's happened partly as a result of the international, I think out of 16 contests, videos in that contest,
Right.
they took 13th. So we're thinking, well, let's see, 13th out of 16. If you were a football or basketball team, you'd think that's not that good. But these were 10th graders who were asked by an adult who was impressed with the excellence of their project to enter that.
Right.
So if you're already placing in international contests at the ripe age of 10th grade, which I think is like 16, that's awesome. And those are Duluth kids. And we could be doing that in every one of the schools here in Duluth or statewide through all the schools.
Okay,
Well, see, what's exciting about it is we went through the trouble. It wasn't trouble, it was fun actually. It was a learning activity, and it took us let's say 2.5 meetings to generate this, okay? So we convene with adults who care about the health system, the business system, the ecosystem, and the civic system. Then we convert that into goals or priorities. We call it targets for teamwork.
Okay.
And then we publish it, relatively cheap. This is worth a little less than $1.
Right.
And we give it to staff and students, and we say, if you'll work on any of those projects, we'll help you get recognized with hours of service learning and maybe even civic honors when you do things like participate in an international contest.
Okay.
So that generates a lot of interest and motivation, because when the kids realize that, oh, you mean I can do a project and get recognized? Yeah, that's a little better than getting a grade on it. As in, they start to feel that their capacity, their creativity, and their spirit are involved in making a difference with our dilemma.
Right.
So that's exactly what we need. So I was so delighted with the success at Denfeld. I'd like to do more of that. I applied for a grant, we didn't get it. But moving in that way, we should be doing this in every school system in the state.
Okay.
And if this weren't a crisis with a time frame of 10 years, we could wait another decade. But you and I are getting a little older, and we need for things to happen right now in this critical time frame between now and the climax point, which was offered by the UN's IPC report.
Right.
So the second thing is we convene, we get the mentors ready, publish the results, and then we start celebrating the kids and honoring their engagement with the American process.
Okay.
I had 2 relatives who fought in the American Revolution, one from Connecticut, one from New Jersey, and they bug me at night. They're saying, why aren't our kids, our American kids, involved with the American struggle? They're sitting around dazed in some dilemma that doesn't really exist on this planet. And so I have no answer, but I'm doing my gestures to engage them in the American struggle for a sustainable American future.
Right.
Now, I'm excited to do that. I'm losing a little sleep thanks to my relatives, and I've seen amazing results. So, let me add to that, when I did stuff like this in Anoka for 32 years, we focused on this process for the last 15 years of my career there. By the time I left in 2005, I had to retire early because I had a life-changing experience in 2000. I'll tell you about that.
Okay.
Okay, but as we a very good team of committed folks in the Anoka Hennepin system, we generated, first year we had, 50 hours of service. By the time I left in 2005, we had 30,000 hours of service. And that's a big number. Numbers can be deceptive.
Right.
Data distorts things sometimes. But the moving power of it was motivated by goals that were set by leaders from Anoka's business community, health community, environmental community, and civic team. Mm-hmm. And so that got so tight with the city of Anoka, we decided to have an event every school year in May so that the kids who had done projects could come share their projects and thank their mentors publicly on TV in City Hall.
Okay.
And the city put on a mentor dinner, and the kids got to brag about their success. And what I saw as an educator, a father, and now a grandfather, I think those kids are building lifelong skills and deepening their commitment that's going to give them the kind of character values that we need more of if we're going to get through this difficult transition together.
Okay.
So in a crowded field of confusion, let's say somewhere in 2025, these kids are going to have some assets that kids who didn't do that kind of thing don't have. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so I'm just pleased to be part of that process because it sort of depends on the community's response, because you can't do that without community leaders. And I want to thank all of you who are out there who helped us put this together, from the business community, the health community, the environmental community, and the city. The city was a lead partner on that, right. The city and the school district. Okay. So we could market this to a statewide audience saying we need to do this right now because of that global report. What's kind of cool is if we got good at doing this, because we have wonderful education resources at UMD,
right.
We could offer training opportunities to draw more people into this process, and it could work anywhere on any continent on the Earth's atmosphere right now, because that's a global problem, which we are, Homo sapiens, have never addressed before.
Mm-hmm. You did mention, I think 2005, something special happened that year for you?
Yeah. 2005 was the year I retired from Anoka. That was my first retirement. Okay. I'm abbreviating. In the late 90s, we had so much positive stuff going on in Anoka, I got to take kids to exceptional events. In 1992, for example, we had a team who had done so much river water testing on the Rum River and then the Mississippi River and then Lake Superior.
Okay.
3 years of their high school they had spent trying to understand water resources in Minnesota. They did such a great job. They were invited and they qualified to go to the Earth Summit in Rio. That was, I think, 92.
Wow. And
so after I learned more about the opportunities, because I was kind of the advisor at that time, I said, well, you can go to the preparation conference, which includes a youth dimension, at the UN in New York, which is before the conference later in the fall in Rio.
Okay.
And because they were two 16-year-old males, they decided to go to New York. So we were glad to take them. They had a great experience. They worked in a youth group of 20 youth leaders from around the world. It was 20 different teams of youth leaders. So, it was like a fabulous experience for them before they came back from Anoka. But the kids I brought back to Anoka were not the same kids I took to the UN.
Okay.
They were transformed and deeply moved by that interaction.
Okay.
All right, so a couple of things like that. Not too many people have that opportunity. I took a number of kids to the International Science and Engineering Fairs. Took another team to a creativity fair sponsored by the Minnesota Future Problem Solving team. That was excellent. Anyway, these enabled me to serve on a national foundation called the Foundation for the Future of Youth, which is out of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And that was fabulous too, because that group out of Washington, D.C. was working to advise and mentor youth leaders around the world who were engaging in improving their community.
Okay.
Both with justice and social action and better investments to broaden their Commonwealth. And so it was like a huge experience to learn from what was going on around the world. And so as a result of being on that, we were challenged to come up with a gift for the millennium when 99 became 2000. So we the people on the board, were asked to give something back to show how much we appreciated the Commonwealth and the creation. And so my daughter and I had decided that we're pretty good at canoeing and swimming, so we decided to take a canoe trip from Duluth, Minnesota to New York City, paddling across the Great Lakes to gather stories. The deal is that we had done a lot of canoeing and we'd had plenty of adventure, but this was kind of a research and exploration adventure. And so it took us 65 days, 1,650 miles. And by the time we got to Manhattan, we originally wanted to go to Washington, D.C. and have a youth event on the National Mall. And I was having a discussion with Senator Wellstone at the time, and he was in favor of it. But my silly school district wouldn't give me the extra 2 weeks to get from New York to
D.C.
Anyway, so no complaints. We were on target, on budget, nobody got hurt, and we had 22 stories. So back to the story. We arrived at the 95th Street Marina, and we had 22 stories, and they were amazing stories about some person or organization helping the community get over a barrier that had blocked progress in dealing with conflict. And so we had a technology pack, and we sent those back to our Anoka website through a colleague who was helping support our trip. And so he could post our photos, our stories, and our map of our progress. And so that was kind of cool. But so when I was done with that trip with my daughter, have to be one of the luckiest dads on the planet, it changed both of our lives because we had seen things that were amazing and still are amazing. So that led to my retirement. I decided I needed a bigger classroom after the things that I had learned from those 22 stories. And that's actually definitely related to this. But in Anoka, where I had more time, 15 years, to work on stuff like that, it brought the city and the school district very close together. That got me the opportunity to serve on this national thing. Then I get to explore on a larger scale, and between 1,650 miles later, we have 22 stories, and it seems like there's a similar thread to these stories, which was very cool. And so that led to my retirement, because I think kids today have more creativity and a need to use their agency now while they're growing, because if they wait too long, it sets them up for addiction. And as you know, we have a huge addiction problem, not only in Duluth, but throughout the country with the opioid crisis. There's sad stories about that. But the point is, if we could help the kids ground their values, test the things that mean things deeply to them, it'll move their spirit. And that spiritual strength is going to give them the grit, shall we say, American grit, to get through the tough stuff. And this is going to be tough. And so what's interesting about the graphic, if you can see this, is this is a difficult team developing better teamwork, but they celebrate their success so they don't get depressed and they don't get lost in despair. There's a lot of potential for that, as you can see in the media today. This is going to be even worse. This is going to be the despair, frustration, and violence that causes things to fall apart, and it's only going to get worse as the curve, carbon emissions, continues to rise. So humans on Earth lose control of what they were given, the creation, the wonderfully integrated systems that support our lives and our communities and our kids. Or are we going to get something that we can help manage as stewards of the creation? I think I'm a seminary graduate, and I understand that every culture has a cosmology. That's an understanding of how things originated. And in our, it's deeper than science, let's put it that way. But in our scientific understanding, we can say the Big Bang that created the universe was 13.7 billion years ago, okay? That's a big number. But it doesn't move people until you say, and that has helped us. Then Earth emerges about 4.5 billion. And then on Earth, life starts to show up a billion years later at 3.5 billion. And Homo sapiens didn't show up until about 300,000 years.
Wow.
Anyway, so what it is you and I are part of a very long and complex story. But we've received so many gifts, we have a debt of obligation. We better do something to protect this, otherwise it's going to be despair and destruction, And people over here are going to wonder, why didn't those two dummies do something about it now?
Right.
So that's why I'm delighted with you and the program you're putting together with the help from the city about Climate-Duluth is just an awesome idea. So I applaud and celebrate your insight, young man. You're so much younger than I am. I appreciate it. Anyway, so I've done this in Anoka, and I'm doing it in Duluth. I'd like to do it everywhere in the country or the world, because these things are dynamics for tapping the creativity and the character values of our kids. But if we leave them to their own devices,
Right.
we're going to miss the parade and suffer incredibly.
I have to ask you, in the short time I've known you, you have a phenomenal amount of energy and enthusiasm, which I applaud. So my question is, what has inspired you to do this kind of work, to focus on this? Where does that inspiration come from?
I've had some rich experiences that have moved me, and they still move me. So meeting people like you and Brett and a few others, Izzy, that's huge. But when you realize also the capacity for things to go wrong is enormous.
Right.
Also, one of the problems in our political system, there's one political party that denies there's a climate problem.
Okay.
I'm hoping everybody in the audience will be able to identify that party, because these people obviously don't represent you or the creation or our Commonwealth, and you better bring that to their attention before they dissolve in history. But I don't know, I get excited by working with people like you and Brett and Izzy and Matt and the mayor. The mayor is just awesome. We have to be the luckiest people in Minnesota, because we've got one of the brightest mayors. Not only is she telegenic, she is brilliant. Yeah. And she's a CSS alum.
I want to thank Bill for being here today. And I must say, on a personal note, I'm looking forward to working with Bill on a number of projects in Duluth, not only this year, but in the coming years. I'd like to close today's program with an excerpt from a book that Bill recommended, Blessed Unrest by Paul Hawken. And complex, multi-trillion-celled replicating organisms called Homo sapiens can argue with one another about the environment and how serious climate change is. But we cannot sit down with a cell and discuss our personal aspirations or the flaws of free market capitalism. Life is life, and nothing politicians have said or voted for can influence primary biological principles. As author Bill McGibbon rightly noted, given a choice between the laws of Congress and the laws of physics, he was pretty sure the laws of physics would prevail. It's an understandable vanity for humans to believe that their cells are privileged or unique, but the distinction between human cells and those of a sunflower is shockingly narrow, while between primates and humans, the difference is slender as a thread. To distinguish between human cells and those of newts, seals, or coyotes, one has to descend to the molecular level of the cell to find the old dissimilarity. We are nature, a realization that stopped Emerson dead in his tracks in Paris and may stop us in ours. We live in community, not alone, and any sense of separateness that we harbor is illusion. Humans are animals, albeit extraordinary ones, and have no special immunity conferred upon them. Given the present rate of planetary pollution and destruction, we need to negotiate a détente with nature and ourselves. Take care.